Chapter 29. The door to Adele's office creaked open, and Wednesday stepped in, locking it behind her with a swift motion. Her eyes narrowed as she met Adele's gaze. "Lock the door, Wednesday," Adele ordered, her tone tight. "The higher-ups in Washington have heard about Jericho. They want me to bring in Tyler to prevent any more casualties." Wednesday's posture stiffened, and her voice was cold and firm. "I won't let you. You think getting rid of Tyler will fix things? All you're doing is letting the real perpetrator get away while he takes all the blame." Adele's eyes flashed with frustration. "You think I want to put Tyler in a mental asylum? I'm not the one in charge here, Wednesday. You want to keep him from being locked up? Help me prove that Miss Thornhill is the one who's been ordering him." Wednesday crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. "I'll get you proof, but only if you promise that he won't be locked up after all this." Adele's jaw tightened, but her resolve remained strong. "I'll do my best." Wednesday held her gaze for a long moment, her anger tempered by a quiet resolve. "You'd better." Miss Thornhill's influence loomed over them both, and the tension in the room only deepened as they both knew the stakes of their next move. Wednesday stepped into the weather-vane cafe, the familiar scent of coffee greeting her as she scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Tyler behind the counter, immediately noticing the change in his expression when he saw her. He quickly moved to prepare her usual, a quad espresso, and as he worked, a familiar voice echoed in his mind. "Great, looks like she's going to press me for answers again." "What, are you defending your master now?" Tyler's mental reply was sharp, irritated. "Did you forget she didn't invite us to the Raven dance last week?" The Hyde sneered. "Don't put this on Wednesday. The whole town is still in shock about what you did," Tyler shot back in frustration. "What we did, Tyler? We're sharing the same body," the Hyde reminded him with an almost mocking tone. Tyler sighed, mentally rolling his eyes. "Let me do the talking, all right?" He pushed the Hyde to the back of his mind as he finished making the drink. Tyler's warm smile appeared as he approached her with the espresso in hand. "Hey, you're still not angry at me, are you?" Wednesday met his gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not angry at you." Tyler didn't seem fazed. He took a seat next to her in their usual booth. Wednesday eyed him, unamused. "I'm mad at your other half," she said bluntly. Just as expected, the Hyde's voice cut in, low and teasing. "Is that why you didn't want to go to the dance last week, cockroach?" Wednesday didn't flinch, her tone unwavering. "I wouldn't have gone even if you begged me. You know how I hate social events, monster." The Hyde smirked, trying to twist the moment into a play for sympathy. "Come on, Tyler has taken you to your quinceañera last year, and again at your cousin's engagement party. I just wanted to attend a party with you, cockroach." Wednesday gave him an unreadable look. She wasn't giving in. In fact, she wasn't about to share her plans to gather evidence on Miss Thornhill, not with the Hyde so close. He'd only sabotage it, after all. She looked at him, straight-faced. "My parents will be here next week. Try to keep your sadism under control." The Hyde leaned in slightly, grinning. "But I want to make a good first impression on them, cockroach." Wednesday shot him a deadpan look. "Tyler's already made a good impression on them. If they already like Tyler, they'll love me," the Hyde replied, leaning a little closer, his voice low. "I'm more the type the Addams family is looking for, and you know it." Wednesday gave him a quick, sharp look. "You can let loose once the threat of being imprisoned is no longer hanging over your head." The Hyde grinned wider, but before he could say anything else, a voice rang out from behind them. "Tyler." "Speak of a nuisance," the Hyde muttered. After hearing Donovan's voice, he handed control back to Tyler. "Curse you," Tyler muttered under his breath. "What were you doing?" The sheriff's voice was full of suspicion. Tyler stood up and gave his father an innocent look. "We were just talking, Dad." The sheriff, unimpressed, narrowed his eyes. "You think I'm blind? Don't make a public spectacle of yourselves." With that, the sheriff turned and walked off, shaking his head. The Hyde's voice echoed in Tyler's mind, complaining. That old man is such a killjoy. Tyler sighed, sitting back down next to Wednesday, his posture shifting slightly as he tried to settle into a more normal routine. The Hyde, however, still wasn't done. He leaned over to Wednesday, wrapping an arm around her shoulder, casually. Wednesday barely acknowledged the touch, but she didn't pull away either. The tension remained, but the unspoken understanding between them was clear: this wasn't over yet. The 1950s black Cadillac hearse rolled into Nevermore Academy with an air of ominous elegance. The Gothic beauty of the car seemed to blend perfectly with the school's shadowed stone buildings, as if it had always belonged there, waiting for this exact moment. From the back seat emerged Gomez and Morticia Addams, both as striking as ever, dressed in their signature dark and dramatic attire. Morticia in her always classic black gown, the fabric hugging her silhouette like a shadow, and Gomez, ever the dashing gentleman, in a finely tailored suit, his mustache twitching in delight at the scene before him. Adele, their niece, had already spotted them from the entrance. Her lips curved into a knowing grin. Adele, good to see you, darling. How was Washington last summer? Did they at least reduce your community service? Morticia asked, her voice as smooth as velvet, but there was a wisp of curiosity behind the words. Adele, always the picture of nonchalance, despite her history of misadventures, returned the smile. No, I'm afraid not. The judge wasn't even happy to see me in the courtroom. She said it with a certain charm, as though the chaos she caused was merely a fun story to tell. Her eyes twinkled. But it's all sorted now, mostly. Gomez chuckled, rubbing his hands together with exaggerated excitement. Have your cousins been behaving? Adele shrugged with a mischievous sparkle. Wednesday's been behaving as well as you'd expect. Pugsley's been relatively well behaved, unless Wednesday drags him into one of her schemes. Speaking of which, she's been having date nights with Tyler in Crackstone's crypt. Adele's playful tone didn't escape Gomez's attention. His face lit up like a child at Christmas. Wonderful. Does this mean that Tyler will join us this weekend? His voice had that mischievous quality, like he was planning something delightful. Adele's lips quirked up into a teasing smile. I hope so. I've been so busy at the guidance counselor's office lately that I haven't had time for a coffee run in ages. Work-life balance is important. Gomez declared with a twirl, as if the very concept was one of the keys to life itself. He placed a hand on Adele's shoulder, guiding her toward the building with Morticia at his side. Let's go see the kids. Meanwhile, back at Tyler's house, things were complicated. The Hyde, always the more theatrical of the two personalities, had taken over Tyler's body for the day. Tyler, locked away in the back of his mind, was resigned to the fact that the Hyde was planning something far grander than he would have done in his usual clothes. Tyler could almost feel the Hyde's smugness as he examined himself in the mirror. You look ridiculously overdressed. Tyler's internal voice was thick with irritation. The Hyde, never one to back down, looked at his reflection with an air of satisfaction. Gomez wears a suit every day. Morticia wears a black form-fitting gown every single day. How is this overdressed? You're not them, Hyde. And you know what's worse? Wednesday's going to snarl when she sees you like this. The Hyde didn't seem bothered by that prospect at all. She might, but she'll also find us extremely attractive dressed like this. He straightened the suit and ran a hand through Tyler's hair, fixing it into place, then adjusted the silver necklace Wednesday had given Tyler. He grinned as he admired his reflection. Besides, even if she doesn't like it, I'm sure her parents will. Just as the Hyde was preparing to leave, Tyler's dad, Donovan, appeared in the doorway. His arms crossed, his gaze serious as he eyed his son. Whoa, where are you going dressed like that? Don't you have work today? The Hyde's voice slipped away, that's you, as Tyler regained control. He muttered to the Hyde, who had, for once, stayed quiet. Tyler let out a sigh and replied, I took the day off. Wednesday's parents are in town, and I'm going to meet them. Donovan raised an eyebrow, clearly not impressed with his son's attire. Dress like that? Tyler gave a sheepish shrug. Yeah. I mean, I can't exactly meet her parents wearing my usual clothes. Do you dress like that every time you're in front of them? Donovan asked, crossing his arms. Tyler paused for a second before responding, an almost nervous edge creeping into his voice. Yes, I don't want to be disrespectful or anything. His tone was calm, but Donovan's expression was one of deep concern. Donovan's eyes narrowed as he regarded his son with an almost pitying look. You're really trying to please them, huh? You know they're not exactly your crowd, right? Tyler didn't know how to respond to that. A part of him wanted to assure his father that it wasn't about pleasing anyone, it was about being accepted by the people who mattered to him. But in the back of his mind, the Hyde was already plotting their next moves. He could already imagine what Gomez would say about the formal wear. And the thought of impressing Morticia, with her perfect, poised manner, made him giddy, but he was committed now. Donovan finally gave a resigned sigh, shaking his head. I don't understand why you want to impress people like them. His voice softened with fatherly advice, but Tyler had already walked out the door, the air of determination settling over him once again. Wednesday stood off to the side, arms folded tightly as she watched her parents' endless display of affection. From the way they gazed at each other to the soft whispers exchanged in the shadows, their PDA could be seen from across the courtyard. She grimaced. Her gaze was a laser beam, but her thoughts were darker, like thunderclouds gathering. I can already hear my mother, Eden muttered beside her, her arms crossed in quiet frustration. Oh, Eden, why haven't you wolfed out yet? Talk about toxic pack mentality. She glared at her parents, no love lost there either. Honestly, I don't know how you and I both survived the family dynamic without doing some damage. Wednesday didn't break her focus on her parents, her eyes narrowed to slits. If I'm not mistaken, your mother's been preparing the pack speech since you were 12. She said it flatly, no sarcasm, just matter of fact. Eden smirked and imitating her mother. Exactly. It's always the same speech. When will you embrace your true self, Eden? You can't hide the wolf forever. And then it's, why haven't you wolfed out yet? Of course, Wednesday said dryly, her eyes continuing to watch Morticia and Gomez, because nothing says family unity like forcing an identity onto someone. There was a pause before Eden spoke again, her tone turning more curious. By the way, I heard you invited Tyler. Are things that serious between the two of you? Wednesday turned slowly, her eyes locking onto Eden's, her expression colder than a mountain's peak in winter. Adele warned me. If I didn't invite him, the family would send a hearse to pick him up. I'd rather he come here and avoid the spectacle. She spoke with the flat, emotionless voice she always used when discussing such matters, detached, almost like she didn't care, but the undertone suggested otherwise. Eden raised an eyebrow, obviously skeptical. Yeah, he does know this is just a casual event, right? Just then, Tyler walked in, and Eden's eyes flicked to him. He was wearing a semi-formal, black and white suit. Eden blinked once, twice, her lips curling into a wry grin. And this is what you call casual? Wednesday's gaze snapped toward him, her lips curling into a snarl as her eyebrows shot up in disbelief. Her expression soured so fast that anyone who knew her could sense the storm brewing in her mind. I take it you didn't know about that? Eden asked, her voice quiet as she watched Wednesday's reaction. No, Wednesday said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I didn't know that he had lost his mind and decided to try and match my parents in a fashion war. Without another word, Wednesday turned on her heel and stalked toward Tyler, her footsteps like a warning bell in the air. Eden gave her one last look before turning to join her parents, though her lips remained curled into an amused smile. Wednesday didn't waste a moment. She stood directly in front of Tyler, her glare cutting through him. Tell me you're not wearing that, please, my parents are here. Tyler opened his mouth, trying to explain, but before he could get the words out, the Hyde surged to the surface, pushing Tyler aside, taking full control of the situation. How do I look, cockroach? Do you like it? The Hyde smirked, fully embracing the dramatic flair of his outfit, hands on his hips as he made a show of admiring himself. Wednesday's lips twisted into a sharp, dissatisfied frown. You look ridiculous. Tyler's voice, though small, echoed in his mind. Told you. The Hyde smirk only widened as he basked in the rejection, and before he could speak again, a cheerful voice called out, Tyler. Oh, my boy. We've missed you so much. We were so sad that you couldn't join us last summer. Gomez's voice was as jovial as always, though his eyes twinkled when he caught sight of Tyler's attire. He immediately patted Tyler's shoulder with exaggerated enthusiasm. Good to see that our fashion sense has rubbed off on you. Gomez grinned widely, pulling Tyler into a side embrace as if they were long-lost friends. Morticia, ever the picture of composure and grace, gave Tyler a pleasant smile, though her gaze lingered on his semi-formal suit with an inscrutable glint. Even if you're just experimenting, darling, we appreciate the effort. Her voice, smooth as silk, was both flattering and cold, genuine, yet distant. Thank you, the Hyde responded with a triumph-filled smile, even more pleased with the attention than he cared to admit. As Gomez continued to examine Tyler's ensemble with critical admiration, Pugsley wandered over, skipping along with excitement. Tyler, you here? He grinned as he looked him up and down, clearly intrigued. Wow, look at you. Already dressing up like an Addams. Adele walked over as well, her teasing smile plastered on her face as she took in the sight of Tyler. You look as dead and horrific as always, she teased, her voice light but affectionate. The Hyde, fully embracing the Addams family aesthetic, gave a deep bow, with exaggerated flourish. Thank you, he said with a playful, delighted smile. I've learned from the masters. Oh, thank you, Adele responded with a nod, her eyes twinkling with amusement. You've become more eccentric since the beginning of the semester, all that Tyler. I like it. I like it too, the Hyde said with a knowing smirk, basking in the attention and approval from the Addams family. As the group continued to engage in their conversation, Tyler could feel the weight of Miss Thornhill's presence lurking just behind him, watching him with that same cold, calculating gaze she always seemed to reserve for him. He could feel her sharp eyes on his back, and the unsettling sensation only made him more aware of how much he didn't belong in this world. Adele, noticing his sudden tension, gave him a small, questioning look. You good, Tyler? She asked casually, though there was a clear hint of curiosity in her eyes. Before Tyler could respond, the Hyde gave a cocky, self-assured smile and looked over his shoulder. Oh, nothing, he said smoothly, his tone dripping with forced confidence. Just enjoying the company. But deep down, Tyler could feel it, the weight of Miss Thornhill's eyes never strayed far. She wasn't just watching him, she was studying him. And something told him that the trouble was only beginning. The next morning, the air at Nevermore Academy was thick with the usual tension, but this time, it was laced with the lingering excitement from the previous night's unexpected drama. Tyler, still riding the strange mix of confusion and nervous energy, found himself amongst the Addams family again, this time at the breakfast buffet. The smell of eggs, bacon, and something unidentifiably exotic filled the air, but Tyler's focus was solely on the group around him. The Hyde had yet to leave the scene. Gomez, ever the enthusiastic, larger-than-life character, sat across from Tyler at one of the bench tables in the quad, a wide grin stretched across his face. My boy, he boomed, slapping him on the back with a hearty laugh. You've got quite the arm, I must say. That pitch yesterday? Powerful. Next time the family plays dynamite baseball, you're my first pick. Tyler blinked in confusion, his fork halfway to his mouth. Dynamite baseball? Gomez leaned in closer, excitement twinkling in his eyes. The same rules as regular baseball, except we use dynamite instead of a ball. The dynamite explodes before the batter reaches the safe spot, and if they're still in the field when it goes off, they're out. Lots of explosions, of course. His grin grew wider, as if that was the most normal thing in the world. The Hyde's eyes lit up at the mention of explosions, and his lips curled into a dark smile. Well, in that case, I would love to join you next vacation. Sounds delightful. Certainly. We have plenty of fun games planned for the future, Gomez agreed with an enthusiastic chuckle. Before Tyler could process that, the serene morning was suddenly interrupted by the sharp voice of Sheriff Galvin, who marched up to the table with an arrest warrant clutched tightly in his hands. The air shifted, and Tyler felt a wave of anxiety ripple through him. Something was off. Something was wrong. The sheriff cleared his throat dramatically, and everyone at the table fell silent. Mr. Addams, Sheriff Galvin started, his voice full of smug authority. You are under arrest for the murder of Garrett Gates. The words hit the air like a thunderclap. Tyler's heart skipped a beat. He turned, eyes wide, to see Gomez's usually carefree expression harden into something more serious. What? Tyler asked, panic rising in his chest. Dad, what are you doing? The sheriff didn't flinch at the question. The charges were dropped, but new evidence has surfaced. You're under arrest, Mr. Addams. Adele, who had been casually sitting by, immediately stood up. Her voice was firm, practiced. Those charges were dropped years ago, she said, her tone icy. You're not arresting my uncle on false pretenses, Sheriff. Not on my watch. The sheriff's smug expression didn't falter. Reggie, the coroner, killed himself and left a suicide note saying he covered up the findings of Garrett Gates's death. We have new information. He looked at Adele with a sense of self-satisfaction, like he was finally getting the justice he'd been denied for years. Adele, however, didn't flinch. Instead, a dangerous glint entered her eyes. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I assume the suicide note specifies the cover-up? Choose your next words carefully, Sheriff. Galvin paused, his smugness faltering as he tried to regain control of the situation. Something in Adele's demeanor made him uneasy. Adele smiled darkly. If you'd gone to Mayor Walkner, you could have saved yourself the humiliation, Sheriff. But thank you. Now, everyone will know the truth of what happened 30 years ago. The sheriff, visibly rattled, took a step back as Adele's words sank in. Meanwhile, the room was completely silent. Adele turned away and walked over to a nearby table, pulling out her phone. Everyone, she announced coolly, her voice cutting through the tense air, it's true that there was a cover-up regarding Garrett Gates's death 30 years ago. But contrary to what Sheriff Galvin believes happened, the truth is far worse, far more despicable than anyone could ever handle. With that, she placed a call. The silence in the quad was broken only by the ringing tone as the room's collective attention shifted to Adele. She spoke briefly into the phone, her tone deceptively calm. It's me. Publish everything there is on the death of Garrett Gates. Make sure the whole town of Jericho knows, she said, her voice unwavering. As she ended the call, there was a noticeable change. Phones across the quad buzzed with incoming notifications, everyone's phones, including Tyler's, lit up in unison. The first video that popped up was the autopsy footage from Garrett Gates's death. The coroner, looking unusually calm, explained, cause of death for the victim was falling after being stabbed by a sword. The victim seems to have been foaming at the mouth, his pupils dilated. There seems to be a shattered vial in his shirt pocket. The substance inside the vial is a potent dose of nightshade poison. The victim was already dying from the effects of the poison before he was stabbed. The second video was even more damning. It showed Mayor Walkner back when he was still the sheriff, interrogating Garrett's father, Ansel Gates. The footage was grainy, but the emotions on the screen were clear. Mr. Gates, the former Sheriff Walkner asked, a vial of deadly nightshade was found in your son's coat. Do you know how your son managed to get such a dangerous poison? Overcome with grief, Ansel Gates cracked under the pressure. His voice, shaky with emotion, spilled out the truth. I gave it to him. He was obsessed with that outcast girl. I told him if he was my son, he'd follow through with the plan. I never meant for him to die like this. It was all those freaks' fault, they killed my son. The video stopped playing, and a cold silence fell over the room. Adele turned to face the sheriff once again, her voice sharp. "Please, take those handcuffs off my uncle, Sheriff." Her words were calm, but carried an undeniable weight of authority as she stood tall. A while later inside the mayor's office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mayor Walkner, clearly rattled, didn't even look up when Adele entered. "I take it they're asking for you to step down?" Adele said, her voice low, but there was no mistaking the threat in her words. "Yes," Mayor Walkner muttered, his eyes focused on the papers in front of him. "Guilty by association." Adele's gaze hardened. "I can't let you step down, I'm afraid." The mayor finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "And why not?" "Because," Adele replied, her tone dangerously calm, "this isn't over yet, Mayor. Someone killed the coroner and framed it as a suicide, just like they made the murders look like monster attacks. The same coroner who worked on Garrett's case 30 years ago. He had no guilty conscience. The charges against my uncle were dropped. Why would he decide to kill himself? Think about it." The mayor didn't respond. He simply stared, his mind working to process the implications of her words. Adele stood for a moment, letting the weight of her statement sink in before turning on her heel and leaving the mayor to his thoughts. As she walked away, the silence in the room lingered, and in the back of her mind, a new question began to form. Like, comment, and subscribe to be notified for updates on this series.